One night, when I was a teenager, my mom went out to visit her sister while my dad was working the night shift. After she left, I had the house to myself for a few hours. I did my usual teenage things of taking a long bubble bath, putting on my PJs, listening to music on my stereo, and reading in my bedroom. I heard a strange sound at the window, some tapping and scratches, but as we had few trees and bushes against the front of the house, I didn't pay much attention to it. Then, it got louder, and I thought I saw a light go across it. I was too scared to check it out and tried to convince myself that it was just the trees blowing in the window or an animal scurrying along the windowsill. After a while, it stopped and I forgot all about it until, all of a sudden, my mom blows through the front door and runs down the hallway screaming my name, calling for me and asking if I was okay. I said, "Chill out, Mom, I'm alright." Completely out of breath, she said that she had seen someone running from behind the trees and that the security lights we had installed on the front of the house by my bedroom were strung out in the middle of the yard, facing away from the house, as if someone didn't want to be seen. I put on some clothes, and together she and I went outside to explore. On the windowsill was a screwdriver, duct tape, and a butcher knife. Chills went through us. We realized what had been left behind, and someone who had obviously left the objects behind when he fled after he saw her car pulling up the street. We called the cops. They took a statement and examined the window. There were a few stripped screws and multiple wood shavings as if someone had tried to pry the window from the frame, and also finger smudges on the dust where someone had recently touched it. The cops said that two teenage girls had recently been sexually assaulted and strangled. Well, one was murdered, but the other survived. She said he'd worn a ski mask so we couldn't identify him. Thank goodness she arrived when she did. If not, I might not have been around to tell you the story. It was mid-afternoon when we checked into our hotel, Hotel Duke. Our room was the last one on the ground, first floor. It had a small terrace. Directly below it was a deep valley and absolutely nothing or no one could ever stand there or stay there. So yeah, after checking in, we rested a bit and then we went out to explore. Not very far from the hotel was an abandoned house of the British era. It was very creepy, and thinking about that place still gives me goosebumps. The house was once owned by an English doctor who would come to Lonavella during winters. The once grand furnitures were now all covered by cobwebs, and there were weird red markings on the walls of a room inside the house. The room smelled really, really bad when compared to the rest of the house. After some more walking and roaming, we came back to the hotel, had our dinner, and my dad decided to go to the balcony to smoke. My mom decided to accompany him, while me and my brother chose to watch TV. Since there was nothing coming on the TV, we decided to join our parents. And so we did. Everything was okay. The whole place was quiet and no wind blowing. A full moon's light graced our balcony. Suddenly, out of nowhere, we saw a white cloth flying from below our room. We all decided to look down, and to our surprise, there stood a woman all in white. Amazingly, her dress was flowing and blowing. Whatever you want to read it as, even when there was no wind. Since there was a valley down there, and that too, a very deep one, we didn't understand how she landed down there. My father shouted to her, "Who are you?" And she looked up to him with her red eyes. A few minutes later, she disappeared. We ran in, locked the door to the balcony, and called room service. Immediately then, a manager and a few waiters came up, and we told them about what we saw. But they all replied that such a thing wasn't possible, because there was a valley down there, and our floor with the one above ours along are all totally empty. They soon left, but one of the waiters before leaving said, "This isn't the first time someone has seen her." We somehow slept and then the next morning left. On our way home, our car suddenly switched its position and we saw ourselves facing the opposite direction while we were on the same lane. I don't know what happened that night, but the four of us do remember that woman as if we saw her yesterday. This incident was told to me by my uncle, who heard it from his uncle. He says that it's a true story, which happened to his uncle back in the 60s or so, but I'd rather not try to validate its authenticity. In India, most horror folklores involve witches who look like the average woman and are always on the lookout to cause harm to others so as to gain some personal benefits, like more strength or increased lifespan or something of that sort. So one night, this uncle, in his 20s, was coming back from work when he spotted a lady wandering along the streets. She looked like she was in her mid-50s, like most women in these days, with nothing being unusual or out of the ordinary about her. Back in those days, people used to be more humane in their outlook, so out of sheer concern for her safety, he asked her why she was out all alone in the streets so late at night. She told him that she had nowhere to go and had lost everything. Out of sympathy, he asked the lady to accompany him home and work for him as a cook since he was staying away from the family and needed someone to manage the house and his food. She agreed with gratitude. He used to get up in the mornings, eat and carry the lunch she had cooked and packed for him to his workplace, come back at night, eat the dinner she had cooked for him, and go to sleep. This went on for some time, but slowly, as the days progressed, he started to observe something rather odd about the food he was consuming. He always smelled something foul in it, which made him want to throw up, but out of courtesy and good manners, he kept his mouth shut. He also started feeling very weak and more tired in those days. He told his relatives about this issue and they collectively advised him to keep a check on the woman. One day, to calm his growing curiosity, he went back home much earlier than he usually used to. He quietly tried to locate the woman in the house so that he could catch her in the act of whatever she was doing, in case she was up to something. He found her in the kitchen, but what his eyes witnessed left him frozen, with eyes and mouth wide open in surprise, and horror and anguish and fear for the next few days. The lady was preparing the dough with her feet, and she was using her feces instead of water or milk. Also, what scared him the most was that her feet, they were just too twisted for any normal human being to have. Just as she realized its presence, she vanished into thin air.